Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your afternoon is off to a good start. Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter, ESPN Cleveland. With the veteran quarterback he thinks is more likely than Kirk Cousins to be brought in by the Browns.
One of my takeaways, and this just happened in the last 36 hours, where it was opened my eyes to the reality that Flacco is more likely to be the quarterback than Cousins.
Why?
Affordability is primary there. Besides the fact that they know him, he is at his age, he is more mentally acceptable to the idea of A, competing, or B, being the third string guy and bringing a rookie along.
Wasn't he, I'm sorry, Tony, wasn't he the guy that said he's not mentoring somebody?
Have you ever heard a quarterback actually say, yeah, I'll babysit the rookie, that's fine with me?
I understand.
None of them ever say it.
Okay.
It remains to be seen if Joe Flacco is in fact on the Browns' radar. They have to do something. You need something other than Kenny Pickett and a rookie, so we'll find out. ESPN draft analyst Matt Miller on the question about Shedeur Sanders being a top pick in this draft.
Why is he not worthy of that pick in your eyes?
Yeah, I think the question is, guys, what's the elite trait? And I think with Shedeur, you could say accuracy, elite accuracy. But in my evaluation of him, at least, I see him throwing to a lot of spots at Colorado. There's a lot of times where he's drifting around in the pocket and he's waiting for someone to come open, and then he throws to his spot. There's not a lot of on-time play from him consistently. And that would give me pause as far as projecting him to the NFL as the guy who's 6'1", 200 pounds, not an elite runner. I mean, he's got some escapability, not an elite runner, and he doesn't have elite arm strength.
We will talk plenty about quarterbacks at the top of drafts and take a look historically. What does the second quarterback in a draft historically look like? That's kind of up ahead a little bit later in our Browns coverage. Well, Louis Riddick, former front office type for the Redskins and the Eagles, with what he thinks the Browns should do at number 2.
They're in a position now where they have to take best player available when they're sitting here drafting at 2. And I think at quarterback right now, there just seems to be a lot of trepidation amongst these teams outside of Tennessee. Teams like the Giants, teams like the Browns when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. I exactly don't know why, but there seems to be some trepidation with that. And when you talk about a guy then like Abdul Carter, there isn't any trepidation at all, because what he is really a franchise-changing type of player, a guy who can really transform your defense and cause it to level up in a way that you really expect out of the number 2 overall pick in the draft. And look, when you compare him with a guy like Myles Garrett on that defense, headed by Jim Schwartz, in a division that has nothing but superstar quarterbacks, when you're talking about Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, and you're trying to dethrone teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes, you need as many pass rushers as you possibly can get in order to hunt those guys down. And you have to come up with another solution when you're talking about your quarterback position. And I think there are other solutions, namely in the bottom of the draft in the first round with guys like Tyler Shuck. So I think you can kill 2 birds with one stone, take one of the best players, most impactful players in this draft in a guy in the pass rusher, and you can really help your football team here in 2025 and beyond.
We will talk plenty Browns with Tom Withers, longtime Browns reporter, as well as Jeff Lloyd from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's turn our attention to the Guardians. Guardians' middle game of a 3-game series out in San Diego against the Padres. Padres unbeaten on the year, and they stayed that way. 4th inning, Jackson Merrill, young kid who just got a big contract today, gets the home run, 1-0 Padres. 5th inning, Luis Arraez singles out into left field. That'll bring another one home. 3-0 Padres with the lead. They just kept tacking on. In the 6th, Cronenworth, a single. That will be another RBI. 4-0 Padres. 7th inning, they strike out Jackson Merrill, but the throw by Bo Naylor is an error, and Machado goes on to score. Michael King got the start, and he just kept striking out Guardians. King, 11 strikeouts. Guardians had 15 on the game. They could manage just 2 hits. Stephen Vogt talked about the effort from Logan Allen starting.
incredible tonight. The sinker, slider, changeup, but more importantly, he was nailing the top rail with his four seam all night. It seemed like he didn't miss one four seam, down or in the zone. It was hitting the top rail or upper third every single time. I mean, tip your cap. We made him work. We made him throw a lot of pitches. We got him out of there after 5, but with 11 strikeouts. So tip your cap to him. He was outstanding tonight. I thought Logan, he was outstanding as well. Got in trouble early, it seemed like every inning, but wiggled his way out, used the defense. He did exactly what we want him to. He pounded the strike zone and got weak contact. Mixed in a few walks, and that hurt, but I couldn't be more pleased with the way Logan threw the ball tonight. I thought it was outstanding.
Yeah, Logan Allen went 5 1/3. He gave up 4 runs. The problem was the 5 walks. Guardians will try to avoid getting the sweep in San Diego this afternoon. Dylan Cease will go against Ben Lively on the mound for the Guardians. Cavs trying to wrap up the top seed in the Eastern Conference. They'll host the Knicks tonight. Magic number is 4. That means any combination of Celtics losses, Cavs wins equaling 4. They wrap up that top seed. Brian Windhorst, national NBA analyst, on the Cavs and Celtics being on a collision course in the Eastern Conference Finals.
It's a tall mountain to climb, but you don't have to climb it now. And, the Cavs still have the magic number of 4 to lock it down. By the way, the Celtics schedule coming in is not hard. It's I think the second or third easiest schedule coming in. It's reasonable to expect that the Celtics may not lose a game. Now, it's also possible they could literally rest everybody. But the teams that they're playing aren't incentivized for the most part, not really incentivized to win, at least not most of them. So the Cavs might have to win 4 more games. I mean, I think they will, but they may have to win 4 more games to secure that number 1 seed. So they're playing great. They're a beast to handle, but they're not a perfect team, regardless of what that record might look like.
Talking about the Cavs and the Celtics potentially meeting in the Eastern Conference. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Tom Withers joins us. We start out talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Sports4CLE continues. We are talking Browns. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, what's up, Dave? It's Taylor. What do you guys think is the probability, or what percentage would you assign to the Browns actually acquiring Kirk Cousins through the trade? And then I'm thinking, what type of guarantees would they give him if he wants to be a full-time starter so he doesn't have to endure another situation like he did in Atlanta? Would they promise him that they wouldn't select a quarterback high, like 2 overall, or would they promise him even if he played bad that they would allow him to try to fix his play throughout the season? What are your thoughts, man? Take care.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tom Withers, longtime Browns, Cavs, Indians reporter. And Tom, I don't know what percentage. I think there's 2 things. It depends on how much money of that $37 million, whatever it ends up, the Falcons are willing to eat, and how high of a draft pick do they want. I don't give them a 4th. I probably don't give them a 5th. 6th or a 7th, I probably would do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dave. I think it's all about that money. I'm still trying to find out what Kirk Cousins was doing in Westlake last week, whether he was house hunting or whatever he was doing. I don't think he had to go all the way to Cleveland to go to Chipotle. So that was fascinating, and obviously another wrinkle in this ongoing Browns quarterback saga. So I think you're spot on. I think it's all about, how much, if they are able to work out this deal, what's going to be the compensation. And on top of the compensation, how much of that contract are the Browns going to have to eat? Now, I don't know all the financial ramifications, Dave, in terms of if there's a limitation on how much the Falcons would have to eat themselves, or how much would be incumbent upon the Browns. It varies from sport to sport, and I'm not savvy enough on all the financial components to know exactly how that would work out. But yeah, his name is still out there. Listen, there's still a lot of options in terms of the Browns at quarterback, and I think Cousins obviously, and his connection with Kevin Stefanski would be a good fit. It would be the perfect bridge quarterback, again, assuming that you're not either willing to move up into the number 1 spot to get Cam Ward, or you're not satisfied that Shedeur Sanders could be your franchise guy at number 2. So, in this ever-evolving Cavs search, nothing would surprise me at this point. But, here we are just a few weeks away from the draft, and the Kirk Cousins play is still possible.
Yeah, I'm not one of the guys that thinks he's washed up completely. I've talked to several beat reporters from Atlanta. We've had some of them on the show. They didn't build the offense around him, and he wasn't completely forthright. They were a little aggravated that he wasn't completely forthright with how his arm felt after the hit.
His injury, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So those two things, and a year further removed from the Achilles, I'm at least intrigued by him. I could see him being an average to slightly above average NFL quarterback.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. I mean, he's got a proven track record, Dave. I mean, this is a guy that's won at the highest level. And again, with the connection with Stefanski, I think he would be comfortable in the system. I don't think he's washed up either. And I find it interesting that, so many Browns fans are all of a sudden, very particular about what kind of quarterback they want, when we've gone through, 40 of them over the last 25 years, whatever the case may be. So I would put Kirk Cousins in that really good, side of the ledger in terms of, veteran quarterbacks, established guys that you could plug in here and obviously get yourself through a season or maybe 2, depending on, what he's got left in the tank. But I'm with you, Dave. I don't think he's washed up by any means. I've been very impressed with him. I don't know him well. I've dealt with him a little bit, at times when I've covered whatever team he may be on that I was part of, but I've been impressed with him off the field. He certainly seems to stand for all the good things. There's a lot of Joe Flacco, I think, in Kirk Cousins, and that's got to get people excited. And again, if that's where you feel is your best option right now, if you're not sold on one of these young guys, then I think it's a really good option.
We heard earlier in the week, we heard Jimmy Haslam at the owners' meeting talking about the Deshaun Watson trade, saying huge swing and miss, and it was an organizational thing, so it comes back to him. It seemed like I liked what I heard from Jimmy Haslam. I'm curious as to your take on Haslam and what was coming out of the owners' meeting.
Yeah, in some ways about time, right? I think we all, over the last couple of years, everybody was pointing fingers at who was going to be ultimately accountable for that. I can't tell you how many people I encountered saying, okay, whose fault was this? Both Jimmy and D. Haslam for a long time had said this was a organizational, decision, but the bottom line is the buck stops with them. And so, I'm glad that they finally, came out and acknowledged their mistake. I think some Browns fans would have liked to hear an apology as well. I mean, they really dragged what is the most passionate fan base in the NFL, given a few others, really dragged them through the mud. This has been a tough 3 years. I think it has really challenged a lot of Browns and their passion for this team and their fandom. I know personally speaking, I have family members that had a real hard time with Deshaun Watson just because of all the off the field situation. Now, in fairness to the Browns, they took a big swing. Some other variables worked against them, right? They had the suspension, which they had to figure, was possible. And then the guy suffers 3 season-ending injuries if you want to add on the second ruptured Achilles while he was rehabbing this past fall. So, listen, I'm glad Jimmy Haslam finally at least put it out there that, he's the one and he and his wife are accountable for this, that they made a mistake and that they dug themselves a big hole. And now it's a matter of digging yourselves out of it.
So Tony Grossi talking about how much pressure is on Andrew Berry. This from ESPN Cleveland.
If he doesn't get this right and these players don't pan out, could we see a change at GM next year?
No. I think it's a 2-year mulligan. Chris.
Okay.
I think it's a 2-year deal. He's not off the hook, but I think the owner now understands that it's going to take more than this off season to turn this thing around. And that to me is very encouraging and refreshing, that they're not deluding themselves into thinking, we'll be right back in it next year. Because I thought that I'll leave these meetings with that conclusion, that even the owner realizes they can't get this thing turned around until they get the Watson money completely behind them and they find their quarterback.
I don't disagree with any of that. And Andrew Berry's draft record hasn't been great, but he also hasn't been drafting high enough to make the impact that he needs to, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's tough to plug those holes when you don't have a first round pick for the last 3 years. So yeah, this was a good segue by you, and kudos to Brian there. That's exactly the other takeaway I think from Haslam's comments this week, and I agree with Tony wholeheartedly. He pointed out that this was going to be more than a year, probably 2 years, to kind of at least right the ship again, right? I mean, you're almost starting over from scratch, which is, I know, impossible and really hard for people to stomach right now because this has been ongoing for forever. But they acknowledge their mistake. They now understand that it's going to take patience. And I know nobody has patience here. And, unfortunately for the Haslams, who have had to kind of learn on the fly and make mistakes as they've gone along over their tenure. But this is the biggest one that they've made. And so now it's about fixing that. In terms of pressure being on Andrew Berry, there's always pressure on general managers. There's always pressure on coaches. There's always pressure on starting quarterbacks. That's the nature of the beast. There's pressure on everybody in the NFL. I don't care who you are. It's a bottom line business. You got to win, and you got to get your draft picks right, and you got to make the right moves to get your team competitive again. So I don't think he's under the gun for this season by any means, though, Dave. I don't think there'd be any pressure, unless they made some catastrophic mistakes in the draft, but I don't see that being possible either. Andrew Berry is a very smart guy. He's surrounded by very smart people. They're going to do their due diligence and do all they can to get this team, straightened out as quickly as they possibly can. And I think Jimmy and Dee Haslam are going to give them the time to do it.
Yeah, and I think he and Kevin Stefanski, they're kind of locked at the hip together. And quite honestly, now you need the quarterback because you need the general manager, the head coach, and the quarterback to all be kind of locked at the
I've heard you say that before, Dave. I've heard that missing quarterback piece has been a constant theme, hasn't it?
Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst, what he thinks the Browns should do at number 2 overall.
Abdul Carter impacts the game as a pass rusher at a higher level than Travis Hunter would as a wide receiver or as a corner. Now, if you want to tell me that Travis Hunter is going to play, 50 snaps a game on offense, 50 snaps a game on defense, that might impact the calculus there. I am still critical that he will be able to do that. I think it's so hard in the NFL to master one position, and we're going to ask this young man to master 2 coming out of college. I think that's going to be very, very difficult.
I've said that for a while, and Tom, I'm coming around to the people that want Travis Hunter. I'm starting to say, all right, I was firmly Abdul Carter, and now I'll at least listen to Travis Hunter.
I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them, Dave. I'll be honest with you. And I think, when that term generational talent is thrown around way too much these days, right? I mean, those are few and far between guys, but these are 2, incredible athletes and tremendous, potentially impactful Pro Bowl type players from the get. I think both these guys actually have that kind of talent. In watching Abdul Carter this past season and over the last couple of years, I follow the Big Ten closely, obviously being a Buckeye fan, and Abdul Carter was always the best player on the field. And so I can see why you would fall in love with him. And I can imagine how Jim Schwartz would love to have him as a bookend on the other side of Myles Garrett. And who knows what the Browns told Myles Garrett before he signed that contract. Obviously, he was intrigued by some of the things that he learned about their offseason plans, and maybe it's to add that guy. And I just hope Miles could maybe handle not being the team sack leader. I don't know. And then in terms of Hunter, here's a guy that has played at the highest level, was the Heisman Trophy winner, played both sides of the ball. I agree with you. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to play both positions, but that doesn't mean that you can't start him at either wide receiver or at cornerback and then use him in a package on the other side. I think that would be, exciting. I think it would be another reason for nationally for people to take a look at the Browns to see what they might end up doing with this kid. But I don't think they can go wrong with either one of those guys. Now, again, the caveat there being, Dave, that you don't like either of the two quarterbacks, because still in my mind, I think you've got to come around to if it's Cam Ward and you need to move up and get him, or if you're content in taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2, I think that's what you have to do. If options B and C in this regard are Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, I'd be fine with that as well.
Tom Withers, longtime Browns, Cavs, Indians beat reporter, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
We're out here busting common lottery myths by talking to real players just like you. And you, sir, what's your name? Where are you from?
Tom Burrell from Lexington, Ohio.
I'm playing Powerball. I use AutoPick when I pick my numbers. Do I have better, worse, or the same odds?
Same odds. I'd say better. I still think worse. Same odds.
He's got it. It's the same. AutoPick, numbers you pick, same odds. Either way. He has it. He has it, folks. He already knows. You can learn more by going to ohiolottery.com/knowtheodds.
We continue talking Browns with Tom Withers. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave Frank from Cleveland. A couple quick things about the draft. Can you explain to me why the Browns would even roll the dice on Shedeur Sanders at 2 and then possibly pass up 2 generational players, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter? If they do that, take Sanders at 2, I'm going to be questioning Jimmy Haslam again. That's it for today, David. Thank you, brother. Be good, be safe, you and the family, and I'll be in touch.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tom, we kind of alluded to it before the break. The only way you take a quarterback at number 2, are you convinced he can be, a top 10 quarterback in the NFL for 8-10 years?
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to find out, right? That's the due diligence. That's why they'll be at his pro day on Friday. You heard Kevin Stefanski at the owners' meetings talking about Shedeur Sanders and how impressed he's been with him, and how this is a kid that has been, raised in the game and knows ball and loves ball. And, you've seen him turn around 2 programs in Jackson State and in Colorado and make them more than competitive. And it was nice that he had Travis Hunter alongside, and wouldn't that be a nice package if the Browns could end up getting both of those guys? But that's a little bit far-fetched. But yeah, I've been impressed with the kid, Dave. I watched enough of Colorado last year to know that he's a quarterback that throws on time. He's able to play the pro style game, obviously, which is, the college game these days, right? Dual threat, can run the ball. Doesn't have the biggest arm in the world. That doesn't really scare me, though, because he seems to be very accurate. Has kind of that clutch gene, just like Cam Ward does. Nothing seems too big for him. I think he would present himself well. I don't think he would buckle under any of the pressure. I mean, this is primetime son, right? I mean, he's been raised in the spotlight since he was a little boy, and I don't see any reason why, he can't be the guy. So, as I said to you before, they've been doing all of their groundwork on this kid. They're going to meet with him again, in Colorado, I'm sure. They've spent some time with him. They've had dinner with him. They know who he is already. I think they probably feel comfortable about who he is and what he represents right now. And it's just a matter of whether or not that's the best fit for them going forward.
Yeah, I saw enough Colorado to know 2 things. Their offensive line wasn't good, and they had no running game, which means that means a lot fell on his shoulders.
And he still succeeded, right? And
yeah.
I was lucky enough, and Scott Petrak, who I know you've had on here before, we both talked to Pat Shurmur, who was the offensive coordinator at Colorado, former Browns head coach. And it's very difficult to impress Pat Shurmur. Let me tell you, as somebody who has been on, the bad side of Pat Shurmur at times with some questions and with some situations. And Pat's a straight shooter. And Pat told both Scott and I that this is a kid that the Browns would love to have. And when I get that kind of a stamp of approval from a coach who I know and that I trust, then I think the Browns have to feel the same way.
All right, so this is from PFF.com. Best fits for teams that didn't spend big in free agency. So that would be the Browns. Needs quarterback, offensive tackle. Best fits: Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, Colorado, Josh Connerly from offensive tackle from Oregon. Let me ask you. Here's what I'm curious. At number 2, what do you do if you're Andrew Berry?
Yeah, you gotta trust your gut here, right? I think, I thought it was interesting the way Haslam acknowledged that they made a mistake, and I've been saying this for over the last year or so, how that move might make everybody a little bit gun shy, right? Which is why when, everybody started, evaluating this draft class, which I think is totally unfair to do because you really can't, evaluate or analyze a draft class until 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, right? Everybody develops at a different rate. So I just wondered that, because they had gone so big on the quarterback, does that mean now they take a step back and maybe address the rest of the team and some other big holes and some other big needs before then they go back to, to finding that franchise quarterback, which is why, and let's go back to Kirk Cousins, which is why a bridge quarterback like Kirk Cousins or like Kenny Pickett, who you already have in the room, could be a better option for the next year. Now, my personal feeling is it's very, you hope you're not back in that number 2 spot next year, because if they're 3-14 again, I got news for you. We are going to have a new general manager and potentially a new coach as well. So when you're in that position, you've got to really think hard about not taking a quarterback. I think it's the way you got to go. And I still think there's been so much out there, right, Dave? There's been so many smoke screens and misinformation, and everybody's trying to get you to go in a different direction. I still come back to the biggest need of the Cleveland Browns for the last 25 years has been a quarterback. You're going to be able to take, if not the best one, the second best one at number 2 and forget everything else.
So we have a little later in the show, we'll go through some of the second best quarterbacks. Ooh, it's not a pretty list.
It drops off quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I think your option could be that trade for Cousins,
yeah.
Or it could be rolling with Kenny Pickett, and and then if you don't draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2, you end up taking Carter or Hunter, and then you still got that top pick or that second pick in the second round where you can get a Jackson Dart or the kid from Louisville or a Will Howard or whoever it is that you've identified as a potentially guy that you can develop that could be your starter down the road.
Part of me wants them to trade back into not horrendously far.
Yeah.
And the guy that I really think would help a lot is Ashton Genty. If you can trade back to 8, pick up a high second round pick, I think that running back's going to be a stud. And the comps, if you're comped to LaDainian Tomlinson, which he is, yeah, sign me up for 10 years of that.
Listen, there are a lot of ways they can go here, Dave, and I don't think there's a bad one. I'll be honest with you. I think the big mistake, though, would be if you decide that these quarterbacks are not worth going for. If Shedeur Sanders is not going for, and then you take another big swing, right, and you strike out again, then you're doomed. Then you're talking about a 5 to 10 year rebuild. Whereas if you get this right, if you get a generational type talent, and again, I don't like to use that phrase, but it seems to apply with guys like Carter and Hunter. If you get those guys right, if you then find your quarterback, or to your point, if you get another impactful playmaker in that first round, whether you move down or not, I'm all for it. Like I said, I think you're in a really good position to add some quality talent to this team for the first time in 3 years.
So along those lines, we haven't heard much about Nick Chubb relative to the Browns or any other team. The longer it goes on without him signing, do you think it's more likely that he's back with the Browns, or are you waiting to see what happens in the draft?
Yeah, I think you have to wait. I'll be honest with you, Dave. I had heard from some people that Nick was had resigned himself to not coming back here. I know when that season ended, some of those goodbyes were pretty heartfelt when he left Berea. And I know his family had said goodbye to some people down at Brown Stadium as well, thinking that the end was over. And not just from the standpoint that the Browns weren't interested in him, that maybe Nick needed a change of scenery. So, it's a two-way street there. And obviously he has not found the landing spot yet. So I don't know if that necessarily means that the door is still open with the Browns. obviously, the Browns know what he means to them, knows what he means to this fan base here. I think everybody would welcome him back with open arms. But if you're not sure that Nick Chubb can help you going forward, then you can't, you out of emotion, you can't just reserve roster spots for those kind of guys anymore.
Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLA. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with longtime reporter Tom Withers. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
This seems like the excitement around pick 33 is a little bit more than the excitement around pick 2. I believe the Browns are going to take Travis Hunter at pick 2, but I believe the mystery around 33 is really gaining some steam. I don't think Browns fans should go to bed early on draft night because I do think the Browns will move into the first round, and I think Shedeur Sanders slides, and I think the Browns end up with Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders on night one of the draft. But that's just a prediction. Hopefully it comes true. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Tom, it could happen, and I wouldn't be, you kind of alluded to it, I wouldn't be against it.
In the dream scenario, I think that would be one of them, right? There's going to be a player, and we're not sure who it is right now, Dave. There's going to be somebody, first of all, that flies up the board, and there's going to be somebody that drops, right? We see that every year. There's that poor guy that's sitting in the green room or whatever they call it, with mom and dad and the agent and the girlfriend sitting around him, and suddenly he slides from what was supposed to be the number 2 3-year pick, and then he's in the 20s somewhere. And then the reverse is true as well, right? I mean, you had Bo Nix all of a sudden, slide way up into what was it, the number 10 spot last year when he was viewed by a lot of people as a second-round pick. So listen, that's not that. I mean, I called it far-fetched before, and it's something that we've kicked around a little bit in the media. Just what a scenario that would be, right? If they land Travis Hunter at 2 and then find a way to package some picks together, maybe move up from 33 into the middle of the first round, and suddenly Shedeur Sanders is sitting there again. So again, I think there's still probably 5 or 6 options still on the table. I'll say this again. I think this is a big week in terms of Sanders and whether or not he's still a viable option from the Browns and how he does at the pro day, how he handles himself, all of those kinds of things. As you guys know, the national narrative over the last week or so has been pointing towards the Browns taking either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Now, again, I've been around this long enough to know that teams put out a lot of misleading information intentionally. They want teams to think that they're going in an entirely different direction, and then they stick with what they were going to do from the get-go. So this is the silly season. That's why it's so exciting for people. It's why it's always good to be back in the first round, which we haven't shared around here for a long time.
So Tony Grossi, again on ESPN Cleveland, talking with why the Browns might pass on Shedeur Sanders at 2.
I'm just speculating that physical traits are a big part of it. It has nothing to do with his personality or Dion. They're cool with all of that. They love him. He's a gym rat. He's got all the intangibles you want. And if they were picking 10th and he were there, they'd probably take him. But at 2, you're passing 2, the quote generational talents there, Carter and Hunter, and they need generational talent on this team, if it's available.
2 things come to mind, Tom, when I listen to that. When you're picking at number 2 overall, you need a Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward kind of player. That when you're up that high in the draft, you got to come away with a guy like that. The other thing is, Shedeur Sanders, and I've said this a couple of times, his best things are the intangibles. He's tough. He understands you can see he can process. those aren't always things that are easily measured.
No, I agree with you. As I mentioned before, he's a guy who's been, from the time he was playing with his blocks on the floor, he was probably diagramming, X's and O's with his daddy. So, he checks all the boxes for me as well, Dave. And, the other thing too is that, he's played the game at a fast tempo as well, which I think is important. And to your point, that he processes the game quickly and understands the game and is knowledgeable and passionate and dedicated, all those things. And we haven't always seen that in Brown starting quarterbacks over the last 20 years, have we? So again, I'd be fine with him. I don't see there's not enough negatives to knock me off and away from him at number 2. Now, Tony admitted, it's not like Tony had been listening to you and I, by the way. But Tony had mentioned, some of the size factors, whatever. He's plenty big enough. There's been a little bit of a knock about his arm strength, but I don't think that's that big a deal. I've seen him throw on the run. I've seen him throw deep. I've seen him do everything I would want to see in a quarterback. And here's the other thing. He's not done developing either, right? Suddenly he gets around NFL coaches and makes himself stronger and makes himself better and grows a little more as a man, understands what it's like to be a pro. He could become the next, who knows what he could become. I mean, nobody saw Patrick Mahomes as being, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time when he came out 7-8 years ago, whatever it is now. So again, I think the Browns have dug deep on this kid. I think they know him now. I think they hope to know him better over the next couple of weeks. If they're comfortable with it, I would be comfortable with him.
All right, before I let you go, longtime Cavs beat reporter, so let's talk a little bit about the Cavs. First of all, 5-5 last 10, Celtics 9-1 during that stretch. How concerned are you just about that as they head into the playoffs?
Yeah, a couple things have concerned me, Dave. I'll be honest. The slow starts, they've got themselves in some big holes in some games, some defensive lapses, Ty Jerome's knee, Donovan Mitchell's groin, a couple knickknacks here and there that, we all don't even sometimes know the full extent of these guys' injuries. I mean, nobody knew how badly banged up Donovan Mitchell was last year in the playoffs until we got through the playoffs and then learned a lot more about what he was dealing with. So, yeah, I'm not overly concerned. They need to tighten some things up. Still a little bit of too much of a reliance on the 3 ball at times. They kind of get caught up in those kinds of games. And to me, that can be dangerous. I think it's important for them to hold on to that number 1 seed. The Celtics are kind of knocking on the door right now, and they've played exceptional ball over the last few weeks. And I think NBA or some of the metrics have it listed that the Celtics have the easiest schedule going forward for the rest of the year. That doesn't mean that they're not going to rest some guys as well. So we'll see what happens there. But some concerns. But before we start thinking about the playoffs, I hope everybody has enjoyed what has been arguably one of the best regular seasons we've had in Cleveland sports history. Right, this is only the 3rd team and the first Cavs team without LeBron on the roster that's won 60 games, and that's something to be applauded because that speaks to consistency. And it underscores the job that Kenny Atkinson has done with this crew. He's kind of reworked this offense. He's gotten everybody to buy in, beginning with Donovan Mitchell, the star player for this team. We've seen the development in Evan Mobley. We've seen Darius Garland. He's had some moments where he reverts back on some bad tendencies in terms of being sloppy with the ball and such. But, what a great year it's been. And let's just hope that they can keep rolling it through April, May, and into June.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to the thing we'll finish up with then. How impressed are you with Kenny Atkinson? When he was hired, it was like, okay. But you couldn't ask for the rotations he has. You're getting contribution from 10, 11 guys. Inbound plays, pace of play, defense.
Everything.
And any check mark you want for a coach, you would have to give to him.
Yeah, he's been great. I'll give you a little inside tidbit. So last year before the Guardians, I think it was game 2 of the playoff series against Detroit, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Tristan Thompson were down on the court. And obviously this was a couple weeks before the Cavs started their regular season. So I took the opportunity to go down and say hello and, kind of pick their brains. Hey, how's training camp going, et cetera? What do you guys think of Kenny Atkinson? And from the jump, Dave, those guys told me how impressed they were with Kenny in terms of just being a straight shooter. Tristan right away said he's like your typical New Yorker, man. No nonsense, loves ball, loves to talk ball, made an immediate connection with his players. And I think that says a lot about, where they're at right now. And that's no knock on JB Bickerstaff, who did a really nice job here and got this franchise through some real turbulent waters over the last 3 or 4 years. But Kenny's been great. And it was been interesting that, this was the right time for Kenny. This was, him and his career kind of intersecting with the Cavs and an ascending team both at the same time. And I think it's one of those perfect marriages. And I couldn't be more impressed with him. He's been terrific with us in the media. Sometimes you get that coach speak, whether it's pre or post game from coaches, and Kenny's not like that at all. He loves talking ball. He just, he really immerses himself in the game. He's probably, I don't know, he probably runs it a little bit too hard in terms of being unable to turn it off or not. But he's all in. You can see that his team is all in, and it's been, like I said before, this has been a real regular season to enjoy.
Tom Withers, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time so much. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you, Dave. Nice seeing you. Tom
Withers, make sure you check him out. Great coverage of all the Cleveland sports teams. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Back to the Browns, Jeff Lloyd from the Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We're out here busting common lottery myths by talking to real players just like you. And you, sir, what's your name? Where are you from?
Tom Burrell from Lexington, Ohio.
I'm playing Powerball. I use auto pick when I pick my numbers. Do I have better, worse, or the same odds?
Same odds. I'd say better. I still think worse.
Same odds.
He's got it. It's the same. Auto pick, numbers you pick, same odds. Either way. He has it. He has it, folks. He already knows. You can learn more by going to ohiolottery.com/know the odds.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Sports4CLE continues. We are talking Browns. Sam Acho on if the Browns should draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2 overall.
Yes, full stop. They should absolutely get Shedeur Sanders. This Cleveland Browns team, let's start with their defense. A few years ago, they had the #1 ranked defense. What do they not have? A quarterback. You have Kevin Stefanski, who's been a 2-time Coach of the Year. Now, what is he doing this year? Taking over play calling duties again. We've seen in years past this offense be effective with on-time throws, right? Yes, the play action works, but this offense is based off of timing, not necessarily targeting one specific receiver, but having the vision to be able to see the field. That's what Shedeur Sanders does best. He throws it on time. He can see the field, very cerebral, understands the game. I think it's a perfect fit for the Cleveland Browns, especially if they'll have the defense. Now you have the quarterback.
Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd, host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. So, Jeff, we're going to talk quarterbacks and QB2. So, again, I think I know you're not in favor of taking Shedeur Sanders at that point. Am I correct with the assessment?
Absolutely. Look, there's a tier 1 quarterback in this draft, and he is going #1 overall to Tennessee. There are no other tier 1 quarterbacks in this draft. So then to use selection number 2 on a quarterback, and you're starting to see now, I've been kind of talking about this for a while, but now you're starting to see a little bit more of the consensus is that Shador's not going as early as people think. You start to see some of the biggest draft names in the business putting out top 50 boards, putting out mock drafts, and you're starting to see, the reality of where Shador Sanders might go. Look, the Browns have a need at quarterback. They have a need pretty much everywhere on the offensive side of the ball. That's, between this offseason and next offseason, there is going to be a massive amount of turnover. So for me, if the guy was there, yes, 100% you do it. But if you don't necessarily have weapons yet, and the Browns have a lot of openings in the running back room, the wide receiver room, the tight end room, next year they're probably going to be overhauling 4/5, if not the entire offensive line. I don't think getting the quarterback now at 2 makes the most sense, especially if you don't think he is, an elite prospect, a top of the draft level prospect. You're putting the guy in a position where it may not be best for him. For Shador Sanders, honestly, the best spot for Shador Sanders is a little bit later in round 1, well, a lot more later, where maybe you're getting to a team who has things more in tune, offensive line in place, skill guys in place. It would be just too big of a gamble and just too difficult of a situation to put the young man in my opinion.
All right, so here's QB2, and there's a recency bias. You look at the last couple of drafts, second quarterback taken overall in the draft, QB2's been really good. And here's the list. So Jaden Daniels went second last year. We know what he's done. C.J. Stroud, he's been really good. 2020, that was a much deeper quarterback class, but Tua, Justin Herbert, Lloyd, or Love rather. 2017, Patrick Mahomes was QB2 behind Mitchell Trubisky. Deshaun Watson was QB3. In 2025, it was Aaron Rodgers. Now, Alex Smith went number 1 overall, and Jason Campbell won a spot after Rodgers. 2024, Eli Manning. You had Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger. So those are pretty good quarterback 2s, right?
Absolutely.
If any of those were in the draft, you'd want them, right? Is that accurate?
Oh, look, if the guy was there, and I think the thing, and like so many people come to me, well, you need the quarterback, you take the quarterback. Usually what my response is, did you buy a house? And, first thing, well, I have a house. Yeah. Well, did you have it inspected? Did you look at other houses? What did we just spend 3 months, doing, a college football season, postseason all-star games, a combine, and all this is going to die down Friday, when everybody heads out to Colorado to finally see Hunter and certainly Sanders, work out, as we'll be at that point less than 3 weeks away from the beginning of the draft. But there's a reason you do all of this. And look, the biggest thing for me, and look, it's not a size thing. And, I could live with the fact that, Shador Sanders' athleticism probably translates more to a quarterback from 10 years ago than one that's going to play in 2025. A lot of it for me, and everybody's the decision-making. Well, when you take horrible sacks and you go from third and eight to 4th and 23, I don't know how you say great decision-making. That is poor decision-making, in my opinion. And, in those instances, you do everything you can to throw the ball into the third row and save your team 15 yards of field position. I don't know how that improves. Yes, he will have better offensive line play in the NFL than he did at Colorado. But in the same respect, the guys chasing after him in the NFL are going to be a hell of a lot better than the guys who were rushing the passer in the Big 12. I think the situation needs to be right for him. And the amount of upheaval that is going to go on with the Cleveland Browns offense starting this draft and all the way through 2026 offseason and the 2026 draft, you don't know what any of it's going to look like. So putting the quarterback in there first, you better damn well make sure he is the guy. And if you have any certain concerns whatsoever, then you know what? Let's get a quarterback this year. We'll get a quarterback next year as well. And hopefully somehow, some way between two, it answers the question of who is one.
All right, so those were success stories of QB2 in the draft. Here are the much, much, much more buyer beware, and there are significant ones. You like Desmond Ridder? He was the second quarterback taken in 2022. How about Zach Wilson? He went 2 overall in 2021. Trey Lance went 3. Justin Fields went 11. You a Daniel Jones fan? He was the second quarterback taken in 2019. 2018 was loaded, and the second quarterback was Sam Darnold. Third quarterback was pretty good. Fourth quarterback was Josh Rosen. Fifth quarterback taken in 2018 was really good, Lamar Jackson. Carson Wentz in 2016. 2015 should scare you. Jameis Winston went 1. Marcus Mariota, 2 overall. Garrett Grayson was the third quarterback taken. 2014, Johnny Manziel was the second quarterback taken. You did get Teddy Bridgewater end of the first round, Derek Carr in the second round. Geno Smith in the second round was the second quarterback taken in 2013. Robert Griffin III was QB2 in 2012. Had a couple of good years. Ryan Tannehill was the third quarterback taken. 2011 should scare people. Jake Locker was the second quarterback taken. You also had Blaine Gabbert, Christian Ponder. I didn't leave anybody out of the first round there, guys. Tim Tebow was the second quarterback taken in 2010. Mark Sanchez, butt fumble guy, in 2009. And Josh Freeman. We're not done yet. I guess we should have put Joe Flacco in the success stories. He was the second one taken in 2008. Brady Quinn, ahead of, right behind Jamarcus Russell in 2007. Matt Leinart, Byron Leftwich, 2002. Joey Harrington was the second quarterback taken, number 3 overall. At 81, you could have got Josh McCown, who was playing for like 13, 14 years. Bottom line is, second quarterbacks in drafts, what has happened the last 2 years is an anomaly. It doesn't usually happen like that.
And the other thing is, and we're talking about the way the quarterback is handled now. I mean, you go back some of those, years, you go back 15, 18 years, you drafted a quarterback, even second quarterback taken, you drafted him in the first round, you were giving him a lot more slack, a lot more rope. It doesn't work that way in the league now. Owners don't care. If you're not getting it done, they'll pay you. They'll fire you. You're gone, which means most likely, the quarterback that they drafted is usually the reason they got fired. Means the quarterback, even if he survives another season, he's now under a new regime. Obviously, you'll have to deal with roster turnover, which you're always going to get when one regime leaves and one regime comes in. The point of this is making sure, and I think basically the whole point of this study that you guys just put up with, who the second overall quarterback taken is, it is not always so much about the quarterback himself as it is about the situation he is going into. Look, some of those guys that were listed there who turned out to be guys who did not make it in the league, they came in with beautiful profiles, great profiles. But you need so many things to click and all work for that quarterback selection to be successful. Sometimes it's okay if you say, hey, he's not the guy. And I've said this a couple times now, and I'll continue to say it. The Browns just spent, 6 weeks, 2 months, establishing that they think Cam Ward is the best quarterback in the draft. So basically you're listing one's positive and then you're listing the other one's deficiencies. You're trying to find out which one's better. So how do you say that, Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this class? And again, all right, well, then we're going to take Sanders at 2. Well, why? We just spent all this time telling you why he's not as good as Cam Ward. So, but now all of a sudden he's good enough to just be the next guy taken. It's okay to understand the value of the number 2 pick in the draft. And look, you can't blow the number 2 pick in the draft. You better get a guy who can contribute. And I think there's just other avenues that could be more successful for this franchise, with this investment. And got to keep in mind, they haven't drafted this high in 3 years. You better bank on this pick hitting.
Yeah, without question. Jeff, Lloyd, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
We're out here busting common lottery myths by talking to real players just like you and you. If an Ohio Lottery scratch-off game has 1 in 4 odds, that means if I were to buy 4 tickets in a row, I'm guaranteed to be a winner. True or false?
I'm going to say true.
Oh, that's false.
You're right, it's false. The jackpot for the Mega Millions is at its highest it's ever been before. I now have worse odds. True or false?
True. False.
False? That is exactly right. You can learn more by going to ohiolottery.com/knowtheodds.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd, host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Just want to hear your thoughts on the rumors that the Browns are going to take Carter at number 2. Me personally, from the things I've heard and read, he's not ready to be a 3-down player yet. I don't know for sure, but I'm not sold on a dude who had one good season and had a blow up. But I just don't feel like that's the move. I feel like you need to get a playmaker, somebody who can play right now and who can play on the field. So if you're not taking a quarterback, I'm taking Travis Hunter over Abdul Carter. Just because look at all the guys we've been drafting on the edge the last 3 years. How many of them have actually really been playing? So to me, I feel like that's a wasted pick if they take it. You guys are going to say, oh, well, he's a generational. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I believe he'll come in the NFL and get stonewalled. That's just my opinion. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, I have a concern. Just he had the shoulder injury that he played with, the foot. That concerns me. When he's on the field, though, hell, he played against Notre Dame with one shoulder and was still best player on the field. But the continuous pounding of the NFL, that concerns me. Guys are bigger, faster, stronger. Other than that, I think he can play 3 downs.
The thing, look, and saying that someone at 6'3", 250 pounds is undersized to play the edge position in the NFL, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. Von Miller was smaller, both height and weight, and that certainly worked out okay. The other thing that we're not taking into account here is when Von Miller was drafted, he was 22 years old. So he played his entire rookie year at 22 years old. Abdul Carter, the only game of his rookie season he could potentially play in as a 22-year-old would be the Super Bowl. So even if everybody's so fixated on the fact that he is 6'3", 250 pounds currently, and let's be honest, if his shoulders still somehow, some way, we're not really sure what the weight room work is right now for Abdul Carter. I'm assuming if they're still getting through the shoulder, any benching and things of that nature that he's doing, it's probably restricted. It's probably light. He's probably not going as hard as he would be if he was given the green light. He's going to go back to Indiana, obviously, for a combine recheck. Anybody who gets dinged up or dinged for an injury at the combine goes back out for a recheck. So I'm not going to say that when that does happen, that could certainly affect things. But for me, the Browns this year are going to need to overhaul almost all of the skill positions units on the offensive side of the ball. Next offseason, you're going to be talking about overhauling most of the offensive line. If you give me Abdul Carter at 2, the defense, in my opinion now, probably has a shelf life of 2 to 3 years. The defensive line, you drafted 2 D tackles last year. You'll still have 2 more years of McGuire. You'll have 5 years of Carter and Myles Garrett. That defense will not need much attention towards it as far as, building out rooms, linebacker, et cetera, et cetera. The offense is going to need a severe commit here over the next 2 off seasons. So if I can just take one pick, and obviously I want it to be this high one, but then basically the defense cannot be, it comes off basically, the radar of importance. Then you can focus on what you have to do here on the offensive side of the ball, where from 2024 to probably week 1 of 2026, you will have 9 new starters on that offense. The only holdovers most likely will be wide receiver Jerry Jeudy and tight end David Njoku.
All right. I know you've addressed this on Browns 3D. Do you think Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator means Jalen Milroe is in the works for the Browns?
There was a time where, I kept circling back to that, but you also have to keep in mind the Browns had one of the head coaches at the Senior Bowl. So that Senior Bowl roster that was led by the Browns staffer had Jackson Dart and had Jalen Milroe. So the Jackson Dart connection goes back to January as well. The Jalen Milroe one obviously is a little bit longer. But you can make the case here for either one of those guys having somewhat of a connection, certainly to the Browns. Kevin Stefanski going to Jackson Dart's pro day. Does that hold any weight? We don't necessarily know, of course. But I think, that is probably the market the Browns are probably looking at as far as, realism. Who knows? Shedeur could most certainly drop. Does he then go into more of a range for the Browns if he does drop in this draft? Milroe is certainly appealing. Milroe is already putting in work, and you see changes in his work, from, how he was playing in the fall, technique work, things of that nature, has a big arm. Dart's got a lot of really good qualities to him. There are a lot of people that I trust who are pretty much ready to tell you that Jackson Dart is the second best quarterback in this class. The Browns should end up with a nice project piece here, But the thing is you're bringing this guy in here, and there's going to be a lot of new moving parts with that Browns offense. And, you just want to find a way and find the right personnel where it's all going to gel certainly together.
Yeah, to your point, there are people that are now saying Jackson Dart will be a top 10 pick.
There's a lot of rumors that maybe the Saints could have a lot of interest. I mean, that could maybe also apply to Shedeur Sanders as well. New head coach, obviously. You come in there into New Orleans. Derek Carr is probably not your future. You want to start looking for your future. And the Saints are, kind of in a similar situation to the Browns, where people think money is tight, but they've always been able to keep, the line moving, be able to find a way to put out a roster each and every year. But, getting that young quarterback at a controllable number, certainly, makes it easier for you to work through your finances and, maybe start to get some of that money that's going out of the pocket, obviously to a lot lower amount.
Jeff Lloyd, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Always a pleasure, Dave. 3 weeks away.
There we go. Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Always insightful and good Brown stuff. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.